The alarm tore through every corridor of Kepler Station like a living thing. Red emergency lights splashed across the steel walls while thousands of terrified beings stampeded through the halls, desperate to escape a death they couldn't outrun. Commander Veltara slammed both forearms onto the command center console, her insect-like eyes locked on the tactical display. The sight nearly stopped her heart. 47 enemy warships surrounded the station. The Dracor Empire had arrived in full force. Their enormous black vessels formed a flawless ring around Kepler Station, circling it like predators around a wounded animal. Giant dreadnoughts drifted at the edges, every surface lined with weapons, while smaller attack craft weaved between them like sharks smelling blood. "Commander, our defense fleet is gone," Lieutenant Keshwar reported, his crystalline body dimming to a frightened pale blue. All 12 ships were destroyed in the first assault. Veltara's antennae twitched sharply. 12 ships, 12 crews, gone in minutes. The Dracor had appeared without warning, slipping out of fold space like ghosts. No declaration, no negotiation, no demands, only death. "What about the distress signal?" she asked. "We're broadcasting on every frequency," Communications Officer Yulin said, sweat gleaming across her amphibious skin. "But the nearest cooperative fleet is still 3 weeks away." 3 weeks. They would be dead in 3 days. Veltara looked across the command center. Faces from a dozen worlds stared back at her. Zephyrians with razor-fast minds. Crystal-bodied Vorak linked directly into the station systems. A quarry who could survive in air or water. Miners, engineers, officers, civilians. Every one of them was trapped. "Incoming transmission," Yulin announced quietly. From the Dracor flagship, the main screen flickered. War Admiral Thenosh appeared. His scaled reptilian face looked carved from stone. Old battle scars cut across his snout, and his yellow eyes were empty of anything except cruelty. "Kepler Station," he growled. "I am War Admiral Thenosh of the Dracor Third Fleet. You will surrender immediately. All personnel are to report to the docking base. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of the station." Veltara stepped forward, forcing herself not to show fear. "This is Commander Veltara. Kepler Station is a civilian facility under Galactic cooperative protection. Your attack violates 17 interstellar treaties." Thenosh laughed. The sound was low and ugly, like metal scraping against bone. "Treaties exist for the weak," he said. "You have 72 hours. After that, we will take whatever survives." The screen went black. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Chief Engineer Korak broke the silence, the crystals in his body chiming softly. "They want the quantum crystal mines," he said. "Those deposits power nearly half the outer colonies." "How long can the shields hold?" Veltara asked. Korak's body flashed through several colors as he calculated. "At their current firepower? For days. But they aren't using their full arsenal yet." His glow dimmed. "If they stop holding back, maybe 2. Dr. Solara looked up from her medical station, her webbed hands trembling. "There are 40,000 civilians on this station," she whispered. "Families. Children. Our evacuation transports can carry 8,000. No one needed to say the rest. 32,000 people would die here. Through the station's armored windows, the Dracor fleet shifted into position with terrifying precision. They moved like soldiers who had done this 100 times before. Because they had. The Dracor Empire had spent decades swallowing entire systems, leaving nothing behind except broken worlds and mass graves floating in space. "What if we fight?" Security Chief Noctur growled. The massive Garaki warrior looked ready to tear through the wall with his bare hands. "With what?" Veltara snapped. "We have station guns against 47 warships." The first enemy blast slammed into the shields. The entire station shook. Lights flickered, then another impact, and another. The Dracor had lied. They weren't waiting 72 hours. It had already begun. "All civilians to the inner shelters." Veltara shouted. "Emergency protocol now. Off-duty security to the lower levels. Help the evacuation teams." The command center exploded into motion, but Veltara stayed frozen at her station, staring at the tactical map. The enemy ships had begun firing in perfect rotation, one ship after another. No pause, no weakness. They never allowed the station's shields a second to recover. It was not an attack. It was an execution. Across the station, families crowded into emergency shelters. Parents held children close while others cried, prayed, or simply stared into space in silence. Young Vorak children made tiny patterns of light to calm each other. Aquari elders whispered stories about ancient heroes who survived impossible wars. Zephyrian mothers clicked softly to their larvae, singing the same songs their ancestors had sung on their homeworld. Songs about safety. But there was no safety left on Kepler Station. Deep in engineering, Korak worked like a machine possessed. His crystalline fingers raced across the controls, redirecting power from every non-essential system. Artificial gravity, food processors, heating, even life support. Everything went to the shields. They could survive without warm meals. They could not survive without air. How much longer? Asked his young assistant, Silvera. Korak's body flashed a violent orange. I don't know. Another blast hit. This one was stronger. The station groaned around them like a dying animal. Back in the command center, new disaster reports flooded in. Structural collapse on levels 12 and 15. Power failure in the mining district. 3 families trapped beneath a collapsed corridor. The problems multiplied faster than anyone could solve them. Then suddenly, Yulin looked up from her console. Commander, I'm detecting something strange at the edge of the system. What kind of strange? Explosions. Huge ones. Beyond the outer system boundary. Veltara barely looked away from the damage reports. Probably wreckage from another battle, she muttered. The Drakor have been conquering half the sector. But Yulin didn't answer. Because the pattern was wrong. Those explosions weren't random. They were too fast. Too controlled. Something enormous was tearing through fold space at impossible speed. And it was heading straight for them. By the end of the first day, Veltara stood alone in her quarters, staring out at the stars. Somewhere in that endless darkness, help was supposed to be coming. A fleet. Orders. Rescue. But space was too large. And time had run out. She pressed one hand against the cold glass. In less than 2 days, the shields would collapse. The Drakor would board the station. They would take the mines, slaughter whoever resisted, and leave the rest drifting in pieces. Unless a miracle happened. Veltara did not believe in miracles. Outside, the enemy fleet continued its slow, patient destruction. And far beyond them, hidden in the darkness, something else was coming. Something angry. Something insane. Something human. Remember this, Elena said, her voice cutting through the bridge like a blade. We are not here to win some glorious battle. We're here to buy time. Every second we keep the Drakor distracted is another second those civilians stay alive. 10 seconds to emergence. The entire ship shook violently as fold space began to let go. 5 seconds. Elena tightened her grip on the arms of her command chair until her knuckles turned white. 3, 2, 1. The TFS Retribution exploded back into normal space like a missile fired from the mouth of a god. She emerged at nearly 15% of the speed of light. No warship in galactic history had ever entered a battlefield moving that fast. On Kepler Station, Yulin's sensor console shrieked so loudly she nearly fell backward. Commander, she shouted. Massive fold space emergence. Single vessel, unknown class, heading straight toward the Drakor fleet. She froze, staring at the numbers in disbelief. Velocity, 15% light speed. Commander Veltara looked up sharply. That's impossible. No, Yulin whispered, her voice suddenly filled with dread and awe. Not impossible. She swallowed hard. Human. What's their course? Direct intercept with the enemy flagship. How long? Yulin checked again, hoping the answer would somehow change. 18 minutes. 18 minutes until one human ship slammed headfirst into an entire fleet. It should have been suicide. Instead, it looked like the beginning of a massacre. On the bridge of the Dracor flagship Bone Crusher, War Admiral Thenosh stared at the tactical display in disbelief. A single ship was charging toward his fleet, its engines burning so bright they looked like a newborn star. "What am I looking at?" he demanded. His science officer hesitated. "Terran design, Admiral. But no Terran ship should be capable of these speeds. Their velocity is beyond every known safety limit." Thenosh narrowed his yellow eyes. He had heard the stories. Humans, the newest species in the Galactic Cooperative. Reckless, primitive, violent. Most Dracor commanders laughed at them. Their ships were crude, their tactics undisciplined. They fought like animals instead of soldiers. Thenosh smiled. "Then this will be easy. How long until contact?" 15 minutes. Send the destroyers Bloodfang and Skull Crusher. One ship is not worth the attention of my fleet. That was the last intelligent decision he would make. On the Retribution, Commander Hayes watched the two Dracor destroyers peel away from the formation. Enemy ships approaching, for million kilometers and closing fast. Elena never looked away from the forward display. Their weapon range? Approximately 50,000 kilometers. In hours. Hayes glanced at Morrison. The weapons officer gave a grim smile. "Mass drivers can fire right now." Elena smiled for the first time since the battle began. "Then let's introduce ourselves." The Retribution accelerated. The ship screamed through space. Engines pushed so far beyond safety limits that warning alarms had become meaningless background noise. "Target lock confirmed," Morrison said. "Fire." 8 depleted uranium slugs launched from the Retribution's mass drivers. Each projectile was the size of a shuttlecraft. Each one traveled at a fraction of light speed. The Bloodfang had exactly 3 seconds to realize it was dead. Its commander saw the incoming rounds. He opened his mouth to order evasive action. Then 4 slugs tore through his ship. They punched through shields, armor, decks, crew quarters, engines, reactor core. The destroyer vanished in a flash of white-hot plasma. For a split second, it looked like a second sun had appeared beside Kepler Station. Then it was gone. The Skull Crusher managed to turn. Barely. 3 rounds missed. The 4th struck the destroyer's side and ripped the vessel open from bow to stern. Atmosphere, bodies, and burning metal poured into space. The ship spun helplessly away, already dead. 2 destroyers neutralized, Morrison reported calmly. On Kepler Station, nobody spoke. 40,000 civilians stared at the tactical displays in stunned silence. 1 ship, 2 enemy destroyers destroyed in less than a minute. Commander Volterra slowly stepped closer to the screen. "How fast is that ship moving now?" Yulin checked, then checked again. 17% light speed. Volterra stared at her. "That would tear any vessel apart." "It should," Yulin whispered. "But it isn't." On the Bone Crusher, Thenosh no longer looked amused. "All ships into defensive formation," he snapped. "Concentrate all fire on the Terran vessel the moment it enters range." "Admiral," his tactical officer said carefully, "the human ship is not slowing down. It has to slow down." But the Retribution did not slow down. It accelerated again. Captain Elena Vasquez was about to do something no sane commander would ever attempt. She was going to drive straight through the center of the enemy fleet. "Range, 500,000 kilometers, Morrison announced. "Bring particle beams online." The Retribution's weapons ignited. Brilliant streams of blue-white energy ripped across the void. Mass driver rounds followed, then nuclear missiles. The human cruiser hit the Dracor formation like a hammer through glass. A cruiser vanished under a direct particle strike. A battleship lost half its hull to a nuclear blast. Another destroyer simply disappeared beneath a storm of railgun fire. The Dracor returned fire instantly, but they could not track the Retribution. The human ship moved too fast. Plasma cannons fired at where she had been. Missiles exploded behind her. Entire broadsides struck empty space. The Retribution twisted and rolled through the fleet like something alive. She did not move like a cruiser. She moved like a predator. "My God," Hayes whispered. "We're actually tearing them apart." "No," Elena said quietly. "We're buying time." The first direct hit slammed into the Retribution seconds later. The bridge shook so hard that sparks erupted from the ceiling. Damage report. Minor hull breach, Deck 7. Were still operational. Then another hit. And another. The enemy fleet finally began to adjust. 43 warships turned toward the Retribution at once. The darkness of space lit up with plasma fire. Shields down to 30%. Torres shouted. Hold them together, Elena snapped. The Retribution shuddered violently as enemy fire hammered her from every direction. Armor glowed white. Decks collapsed. Atmosphere screamed out through shattered hull plates. Still, the ship kept moving. Still, she kept firing. Captain, Morrison shouted over the alarms. We've destroyed 31 enemy ships. Elena looked at the tactical display. 16 remained. But the Retribution was dying. Half the bridge was dark now. Smoke filled the air. Blood ran down Elena's forehead. Athena, she said. The AI answered immediately. Structural collapse in 6 minutes and 27 seconds. Silence. Then Elena stood. All right, she said. If we're going down, we're taking that bastard with us. The bridge fell silent. Every eye turned toward her. Chief Torres, Elena said. How much power can you pull from the remaining reactors? Torres looked up sharply. Captain, if I do what you're thinking, the ship won't survive. We're not trying to survive. The realization hit the crew all at once. She wasn't planning to retreat. She wasn't planning to escape. She was planning to ram the flagship. Reroute everything, Elena ordered. Life support, gravity, inertial dampeners. Every last. What into the main particle beam array? Torres hesitated for exactly 1 second. Then she nodded. Yes, Captain. The Retribution began to die. Lights failed. Artificial gravity vanished. Crew members floated in their restraints as the ship tore itself apart around them. But the main particle cannon grew brighter and brighter until it looked like a second sun burning beneath the hull. On Kepler Station, Commander Voltara watched in horror. What are they doing? Lieutenant Keshwa stared at the tactical display, his crystalline body glowing with disbelief. They're going for the flagship. On the Bone Crusher, War Admiral Thenosh finally felt fear. The human ship was coming straight at him. It had already destroyed 31 warships. Now it was aiming for him. All ships fire, he screamed. Destroy that vessel. But he was too late. The Retribution fired first. The particle beam that erupted from her bow was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Every remaining ounce of power, every reactor, every emergency battery, every dying breath of the ship itself, all of it became one impossible blast. The beam struck the Bone Crusher. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the Dracor flagship came apart. Not exploded, disintegrated. The beam tore through its shields, its armor, its engines, its reactor core. The flagship vanished in a storm of white fire. 3 nearby Dracor ships disappeared with it. The blast lit the darkness so brightly that even people inside Kepler Station had to shield their eyes. And then, silence. The surviving Dracor ships broke formation. Then they ran. Commander Voltara stared at the emptying battlefield in disbelief. The impossible had happened. One ship had broken an entire fleet, but the Retribution drifted silently through space. Her engines were dead. Her hull was shattered. And inside the wreckage, Captain Elena Vasquez slumped in her chair. Captain, Hayes whispered weakly. The enemy is retreating. Elena smiled through the blood on her lips. The civilians? She asked. Safe. She closed her eyes. Good. 12 hours later, Kepler Station rescue crews found the Retribution floating in darkness. Commander Voltara personally boarded the ship. The inside looked like a graveyard. Twisted metal, burned wiring, broken bodies. Yet somehow, more than 500 crew members were still alive. They found Elena in the medical bay. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, unconscious, but alive. Dr. Sarah Kim looked up from beside her captain. She'll make it, the human doctor said quietly. Humans are hard to kill. Days later, when Elena finally woke, Voltara stood beside her bed. Why? The commander asked. Why would you do this for strangers? Elena looked at her for a long moment. Because someone needed help. That's all. Elena gave a weak smile. That's enough. 3 days later, the official Galactic Cooperative fleet finally arrived. They found Kepler Station still standing. They found the Dracor fleet destroyed. And they found one half-dead human cruiser that had changed the galaxy forever. Word of the battle spread across every world. One ship against 47. A battle that should have ended in tragedy became a legend. For the first time, the galaxy understood something terrifying. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the smartest. They were not the most advanced. They were simply the species most willing to do the impossible. And when the next distress signal echoed through the stars, people everywhere whispered the same thing: call the humans.